people aren't being discipled, people aren't multiplying, we are in gross violation of the Great Commission. Yet, if you install any element into your disciple-making practice that successfully does those two things, you're going to hear some of these same pushbacks.
Hey friends, welcome to the 1000 Houses podcast, where we encourage and equip households to make disciples in and through the home. Every episode, you'll hear interviews, teachings, and conversations around what it looks like to turn your home into a hub for mission, community, and discipleship. If you'd like to learn more about what entering into a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org for more info. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. April, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Enjoying this beautiful fall weather that we're having.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Gorgeous, cold, fire, all those wonderful things about the fall.
I wouldn't say cold, I would say chilly. It's like just the right temperature, crisp to enjoy being outside without sweating to death or freezing to death.
Yes. So good. Yeah. And if it were 5 degrees colder, I would be like, can we go to Florida yet? I'm such a wimp. I love warm. Okay. But not too warm or not humid. So,
right.
Yes, we humans were made for very small tolerances, apparently, but we must suffer. Speaking of suffering, let's talk about discipleship. So, I wanted to talk to you, April, today about probably the number one pushback that we get about disciple making is you need to think about discipleship as purely organic. And this is not unfamiliar at all to us. I believe this for many years. I was actually confronted, like this whole idea of discipleship came from me being confronted about that by a missionary who was in China, and he was asking me how I was making disciples. I'm like, oh yeah, we make disciples all the time. We just we're hanging out, we're doing life. We were doing lots of house church stuff. And he was just scratching his head saying, okay, yeah, but when do you make disciples? And I was like, I just said that. We're doing life, we're hanging out. He's like, no. And he literally opened his Bible to Matthew 28. And it's like, okay, look at this. Look at what it says here. It describes discipleship right here. Jesus just finished spending 3 years apprenticing them and then tells them to go and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. Is that just naturally happening when you're just hanging out, doing life, being organic? Anyway, I got more and more uncomfortable in this conversation. I was like, and I got super convicted. I was like, oh my gosh, have I spent the last 5 to 10 years hanging out, doing life, and never really making disciples? And I just really felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit come upon me. So as we are sending people out that are trained in life-on-life discipleship, which is a process that we are encouraging people to actually be very intentional about how they call people to be discipled, to go through a very similar blueprint to what Jesus went through. Jesus actually took people through what today would be called a program. It had limited numbers of participants allowed, right? Jesus said there were the 3, the 12, the 72. He was very careful about who he picked. He handpicked the ones he wanted to be with him, it says in Mark and in Matthew. Then he took them through a defined process. He had repeated a particular curriculum you see in the Sermon on the Mount, but he also was giving it in Luke, I think it's Luke 6. So you have all of the makings of a very clear process and a clear kind of training. And along with that, there was this life-on-life reality that Jesus hung out with them. He did have meals with them. They did see and experience his life. But the fact that he was doing that didn't change the fact that he also was teaching defined people, defined topics. Those can happen at the same time. But today there is a huge bias in our kind of current Christian that as soon as you present something that could feel programmatic, like it has intentional elements to it, when we get together, who's a part of this? Then you're like, whoa, what are you trying to do? That's can we just hang out? Can we just be organic? And so we're a lot of people that we are training to make disciples in a way consistent with how Jesus did it and what is defined in Matthew 28. We're getting a lot of pushback. So I want to talk about a few of those examples. But yeah, April, how do you think about this topic?
I think with a lot of surprise, when I start to think back through my own personal history and and think I grew up kind of in the church in a Christian home, and the lack of emphasis on discipleship. And I would say it was very, very biblical church, very biblical home. Not perfect, of course. We had our flaws and our things that we were working through and figuring out, but we were attempting to live by the Bible. And there was a lot of imparting going on, but imparting imparting truth, um, but not necessarily with the intention of then that person continuing the downline of then them imparting truth to someone else, and especially in an intentional way. And so the idea of the seed being in the fruit, if you're pouring into someone and you want them to then turn around and be able to do this themselves, that element is missing. So I did receive I was poured into a lot. I was taught a lot. I was imparted to a lot. I observed a lot. I was around a lot of Christian people growing up, but the intentional side of someone taking me and saying, I want to impart to you the ways I have learned to obey Jesus. And then I want you to do the same. And I'm going to check in with you, and I'm going to see how you're doing, and I'm going to see if you need any help. That element did not exist.
Yeah.
So I think I sit back with a lot of surprise when I ask just a friend, a Christian friend, and say, have you ever been discipled? Most of the time the answer is not really. Or there was this one time for like this lady kind of discipled me. So it is interesting. It's like kind of like a vacuum.
Yes. So when you ask people if they've been discipled, they oftentimes have a hard time answering yes. If they are answering yes and you say, okay, are you also then making disciples in the way you were, the answer is almost always no. So people aren't being discipled. People aren't multiplying. We are in gross violation of the Great Commission. Yet when we actually present a strategy, a blueprint for how to do this to people who would love to, like, have never been discipled and aren't currently discipling, they oftentimes will push back on the elements that actually make it both discipleship and help it to multiply. Because there's a certain level of structure you have to have in a disciple making process to actually cause it to be real discipleship, like intentional enough so that it's clear who the apprentices are and who's actually doing the discipling, and that it be multiplying, that it's something that can be done all the way to the fourth, fifth, sixth generation. And so if you install any element into your disciple-making practice that successfully does those two things, you're going to hear some of these same pushbacks. So like an example, and we have a great WhatsApp group with alumni from our Life on Life. And if you guys want to jump on Life on Life, please, we'll spend 3 months coaching you how to begin a discipleship practice that both transforms people's lives and multiplies. But sometimes you will, and we hear this, and this probably, like I said, the most common pushback in the alumni group is that when they start to present this to people and say, hey, let's start discipling, let's start a practice of discipleship, they'll say things like that this doesn't feel spirit-led. This is putting some kind of business model on discipleship. Discipleship should not have this kind of structure. It should just be more organic. Like, these are the kinds of things. And so someone was asking, like, what do you say to people? And a little bit snarky, I just said, well, I say something like, show me your blueprint for making disciples that's multiplying to the fourth generation, and we'll do that. If you can't, I'm going to make sure we're obeying the Great Commission, but say a little nicer. So I don't trust when people push back in an area where they're not obeying. Like, I think it's totally fine. And sometimes I'll run into people that have an amazing discipleship and they're like, oh, here's how I do it. I do it differently than you, but this is what's working for me and it's working for other people. I'm like, awesome. Please keep going. I'm not going to give you any pushback. For somebody who's sitting on the sidelines, it's like, it is the ultimate sort of, what do they call it? Monday morning quarterback. They're not making disciples. They haven't made a disciple in years. There's no fruit of discipleship coming out of their life. They are in gross disobedience to the Great Commission. And when you come to them with a blueprint that actually begins the process of obeying the Great Commission, you will get a lot of pushback from people who are currently disobeying the Great Commission. And I'm just telling you guys, there is something really wrong with that. We need to become far more sensitive to the obedience to the Great Commission. And there's lots of ways that you can insert what is spirit-led. I love it when there are elements of when we are like having any kind of structure, any kind of strategy is not mutually exclusive from being spirit-led.
Right.
There is a constant process of asking the Holy Spirit, what do you want me to teach, the people I'm discipling? There's praying over them during our coaching meetings and trying to figure out what is the Spirit saying to you? We even have gatherings where all we do is sit in silence until somebody hears from the Holy Spirit. Like, there's a lot of elements of trying to listen to the Holy Spirit, but you need to have a structure, and the New Testament really calls these traditions. You need to have a set of traditions that facilitates the making of disciples. And if you don't, then what you're lacking is maybe not obedience to the Spirit, but it could be you're lacking traditions. You're lacking structure. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11, hold to the traditions that I gave you, because to be a group of people on mission, we have to agree on basic things like when do we meet, and how do we meet, and where do we meet, right? Just to be a church, to be a body, you have to do those things. The same is true with discipleship. You have to answer some basic structural questions so that this thing actually happens. And if you have zero strategy, you're just sitting around waiting for lightning to strike, then guess what? You're going to have zero fruit. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And that's the reason why when you go overseas, you see these amazing movements that are getting to the third, fourth, fifth generation. There's over 1,000 disciple-making movements that happen overseas, almost none in the West. And we need to be humble about this. We've got to stop pretending like we have something to teach people. We have to stop reacting and say, well, this is somehow violating my freedom or my desire to be purely authentic. All these things to me just feel like Western cultural baggage that we're importing into the New Testament and suggesting that our lack of obedience, our lack of intentionality is somehow spiritual. It's not spiritual when it leads to disobedience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's part of the individualism too. Like, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I can talk all day about myself and what I've learned, but like to pour into you and then help you as you are then making disciples, that's going to ask a lot of me. And so I don't, there's this like infringement on our individualistic rights
Yes.
of there is an amount of sacrifice that comes with making disciples. And you have to know where your motivation comes from in order to do that.
Yes.
And I think that we just excuse away so much. We use so many excuses to not be doing this,
Yes.
to the point where I feel like people aren't even entertaining the question anymore.
Right.
Am I making disciples? Should I be making disciples?
Yeah.
That's not a question on your average Christian's lips.
Yep. And we need to stir this up, because it's not okay to disobey the most direct and clearest command, the final command given to us by Jesus when he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, if you're a disciple, you should be listening to the next thing he says. Go make disciples of all nations, baptize them, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. Like these basic elements are really important, and it's going to require some level of structure and intentionality for you to accomplish the Great Commission. And if you attempt to do this, believe me, you will face pushback, because the enemy does not want this to happen. And so you have to get steel in your spine in this area and say, I am going to obey the Great Commission. We are going to make disciples. If you do not have a blueprint currently for how to do this, please join us and help us give you one. Now, one of the things that's going to happen, and this is part of what I want to unpack, and I want to make this, also practical, not just rant about this, even though I would love to. I'd love to keep going. Part of what I want to do is help you guys and understand that just in terms of what you need is you're going to send people an email and invite them into a process of discipleship. And they're going to feel some level of dissonance when they get that email from you, because all of a sudden you're going to say some things that are going to be a little bit hard for them to swallow. You're going to say, let's go into a season of discipleship. I would like to disciple you. And that is putting them in the position of apprenticing, right, to you. And we're like, oh, that is there a hierarchy all of a sudden? It's a season. It's like 5 or 6 months. But yes, during the season, I'm going to personally take responsibility to help you grow. I know that's going to offend you. Like, I know that, how dare you? Let's just sit around a fire and smoke a cigar. And maybe you might say something that organically comes out that might affect my life. And I can choose at that moment whether or not to listen to you or not. Can we just do discipleship that way? No, I am going to actually study and understand what is the Spirit doing inside of you. And I'm going to exhort directly into those areas. I'm going to take responsibility to actually try to help you obey the commands of Christ. This is what discipleship is all about. And so, they're going to get that email. They're going to feel some dissonance because it's going to cause them to realize that, wow, somebody's about, now some of you guys, if you got an email like that, you'd say, oh my word, that would be so amazing. I mean, imagine getting an email from somebody 10, 15, 20 years older than me that I really respect in the faith, telling them they want to spend the next 5 to 6 months investing in me. Wow, that would be amazing. But I'm telling you guys that a lot of people are getting these emails, and when they get them and it's got a little structure to it, even something as daring as saying, "Hey, maybe you should pay your own way because we have a couple getaways. Those can cost money. We go to hotels, we go camping, whatever it is," and say, "Hey, could you pay for yourself, and be as a part of this?" And some people are like, "How dare you ask for money?" It's like, wow, like, how dare you stop obeying the Great Commission? Like, why isn't this worth a little bit of money to support yourself in trying to be discipled? And I'm going to volunteer my time and make sure that you give that. I'm not asking you to pay me for my time, although, the New Testament makes that perfectly acceptable. I'm asking you to pay for yourself so I can invest in you. And there are people who are pushing back even on that. And that is, I'm finding really frustrating.
There's a lack of passion. There's a lack of passion among Christians today. I think we've gotten so comfortable with consumerism that we are just consuming. When we're told that the bar is to attend a lecture, essentially a sermon on a Sunday morning, and that's the bar. And then if you're really, really committed, then you're going to spend your extra time going to a house community within the, like a community group or something like that within your church, and that's going to be an extra night a week, then you're like, that's like a really committed person would do something like that. And it's just this like, okay, I can consume and I can pick which group I want to go to based on if it's the proper affinity for me and what I want, if I think I'm going to grow or I'm going to, get anything out of it. And so we've stopped asking the question, what did Jesus ask us to do? He said, go and make disciples and I will build my church. And I think we're so focused that we have it upside down and have completely just forgotten the command. It is a direct command from Jesus that we're supposed to be making disciples. And so I think when you're dealing with pushback from that, it can feel hard because it's like our culture at large, the way it's reflected in the Christian culture. So like, we don't want to tell anyone that they need to work on anything. We don't want anyone to feel judged, or we don't want anyone to, heaven forbid, think that they might have areas that they could grow in or something like that. So if you're, I think that people in leadership positions find it difficult to want to promote the idea of discipleship because they are feeling like they're going to lose some of their sheep or their people if they start to promote this way of life where you're being challenged and being told that like maybe you have some areas where let's take this to the Lord. Let's find some scripture to combat this. So when you're walking alongside someone through discipleship, that's the life on life component. Life on life is not just sitting around and like hoping that a good conversation gets struck up. It's like you're intentionally coming in with a specific amount of time, and you need to like make the most of it and get down to it. And so we need to pray that the Holy Spirit will just breathe fresh wind on people's hearts and give them a passion and a desire to be discipled, and then to want to therefore also make disciples out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, you bringing up that contrast that we're always wrestling with, which is Jesus saying, go and make disciples and I will build my church. And what we tend to say is, we will build the church and disciples will somehow just magically appear. And what it appears to be to me is that we are called to intentionally make disciples. If there's anything that you should intentionally structure, it's the obedience to that direct command, because there is something that organically will come out of discipleship. That is the church. And I do think that there are structures and traditions we need for the church as well. But I think if you had to put like structure initially into something, make disciples, and it's amazing when those disciples start to gather, there are things that can start to happen. That is called the church, the body, that the elements that start to occur. And again, I'm in favor of church traditions as well. But it's very, back ass words, as they say, to say, oh, let's be organic about discipleship, but structured about church. That is very strange to me from a New Testament perspective. Jesus like modeled a lot of structure when it came to his approach to disciple making. So I think just to take this down another level of practicality, one of the reasons why I think we've really struggled with this is because there has been a slippery shift happening in the definition of discipleship. So
Yes.
it now just means anytime that you might learn something, you're like, wow, that really discipled me, heard a good sermon or listening to a cool podcast like this. And you're like, oh, that's a part of my discipleship. And sure, I understand what people are saying there. It's part of my general spiritual growth. But discipleship in the New Testament needs to actually be consistent with what the disciples would have recognized as discipleship, right? When Jesus said, go and make disciples, what did they think? And this is how we try to constrain the definition of discipleship to make sure we're obeying the Great Commission. That's the reason why I think it's really important to be very hard on this definition, because I
Yeah.
do not want to get to stand before Jesus and say, I thought I was obeying you, but I didn't actually think deeply about what you actually commanded.
Mm.
And so let's think deeply about it. What would the disciples have thought? And so the definition of discipleship that I think makes sense of what the disciples would have thought is that discipleship is the process of taking on apprentices to train them how you follow Jesus. The process of taking on apprentices to train them how you follow Jesus, right? Because that's exactly what had just
Yes.
happened. Jesus took them through a process. It involved a lot of elements where he, again, picked specific people for a specific period of time. It took them through a number of trainings. Yes, there was lots of life on life components, and that's an important, critical part of it. And that is an important, critical part of apprenticeship. If somebody were to apprentice under you to become a carpenter, you would have all these elements. It would be a certain amount of time, certain amount of money. There would be a process of things that you would be training them in, and there'd be lots of organic moments where you would see how they did certain things. All of that's important, but you can't cut out all the structural parts. So that's an apprenticeship. Now, we aren't familiar with apprenticeships today,
Yeah.
but that's a critical component. It's a process, taking on an apprenticeship, and it's got to be how you follow Jesus. The way that I think most people today want discipleship to be defined is the organic experience of hanging out with friends to discover how each of you does life. That's what
Yeah.
we think. That is not discipleship. The organic experience of hanging out with friends to discover how each of you does life. Like, guys, I understand where that's coming from. Okay. That is not discipleship. There's no way that Jesus would have recognized that definition, the organic experience of just hanging out with friends. I know why you want to do that. Like, I like doing that too. Like, I find it's a lot more work to initiate a process to take on apprentices to train them how I follow Jesus. That's a lot more work than the organic experience of hanging out with friends and discovering how they do life. And I'm all about that. That's called fun. That's called free time. That's called friendship. Those are a lot of things you can call that. And I think those are really great experiences, but that is not discipleship. Like, we have to get more narrow if we care about obedience.
Yes. Yeah, I really feel like the way that the lackadaisical attitude that we can take towards it. Let's say you're having a conversation about discipleship and the things you brought up at the beginning, the things that bother people about it, like, oh, that's so intentional. You're taking away. Like you said, we did that. Like, we tried that, and we really believed that for a long time. Like, no, 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 don't put structure. That puts too much like weirdness into the we're just gonna like let things unfold, and they're gonna be next to me while I'm like taking care of my kids. And there is definitely a part of that that is effective, and but we're not teaching the ways of Jesus to them. And I think another thing that people struggle with is, even if you say, okay, convince them, okay, I should be making disciples. But wait, wait, wait. Who am I to make a disciple? Who am I to say to someone, would you like me to disciple you? So I fell kind of like in the trap for many, many years of believing this lie that I kind of have nothing to offer, or that I haven't figured enough out yet, and so therefore I couldn't be used in this way. And that one day I will get to this place of having figured out like 90% of life, and then I could start like pouring into people, or people would care about what I have to say, or I'll get older enough than them that then I'll be able to say something. And I felt like, I had this realization, like, what a slap in the face to the Lord and what he has taught me and the things that he has brought me through. Other people could really benefit from that and learn from those things and the things that I have learned about Jesus, I want to pass on to other people so that they can, you know, follow him more closely. And I think that it's a lie of the enemy. You have to be really careful if you find yourself saying like, oh, but who am I to do this? You're a creation of God. You're someone who has, if you have a relationship with the Lord, then you can teach someone what God has taught you. Now, you're not perfect. You're not Jesus. Like, where the analogy kind of breaks down is like Jesus was the ultimate disciple maker. He had it all figured out. And so for us to be like, oh, I only have this many years on this earth, and I've only been a Christian for this long, I've only learned this many lessons. That is true. I mean, we are like partial. Well, we're not perfect. So that's why I think it's okay for people to be discipled multiple times by multiple people across their Christian life, but to not then pour that back out into someone else in a life stage or two before you, and say like, oh, okay, I do have something to offer you in this area. I think that that's really honoring to the Lord, and it's a good steward of what he's
Yes.
given you.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, it's a perfectly analogous to what it means to become a parent. If you
Yes.
ask yourself the question, who's the perfect mother or father, the best person that I know in this city to raise my children? And until I'm a better mother or father than them, then I have no business having kids. That's what we're saying when we say, oh, I can't make disciples. And what's amazing is that God does entrust children to broken people like us at stages in our life when we're, much less mature. And when we send our last child off, we're like looking at each other, April and I are like, okay, I think now we're about ready to raise kids.
Yeah.
That
Totally.
is kind of the way that God chose to do it, right? And we have to be totally okay with his decision to entrust children to us. And in the same way, you are stewarding really important lessons that need to be imparted to other people, and their spiritual life will be greatly enhanced. Now, part of it is that our blueprint says you don't have everything, you only give what you have to give. And
Yeah.
so we want to constrain discipleship to the areas where you are following Jesus. There might be areas where you're like, look, I'm still in process on this thing. Great. Let somebody else do that imparting. You impart what you have because you're stewarding those things. So we want to really let and release you and help you find ways to do that. So if you guys are interested in this, obviously we feel very passionate about this. We really want to help you guys obey the Great Commission. And if you either are not currently making disciples, or if you are making disciples, they're not making disciples, we really invite you. Like, we are available to help coach you. We'll spend months working with you and helping you get a disciple making movement going. So you can go to 1kh.org and apply for Life on Life discipleship. Let us know you're interested. We would love to spend time with you. We just finished up one cohort. We're kicking off another one next week. Really excited to get that started. So this is what we love to do. We love to see disciple making movements bubble up, but we really feel like it's important that we understand what this actually is, and you're going to get pushback. And so part of what we want to do is also be a community for you guys, a community for those who are in the process, in the trenches, trying to fulfill and obey the Great Commission in various ways. Like, we want to be together, doing this together.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, April, for letting me get that off my chest. So this is a really
You bet.
important topic. Thank you guys for listening.
Well, friends, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about 1,000 Houses or discover what a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org. We'll see you for the next episode.